Hi there. Welcome to the third day of National Library Week. Sorry to interrupt your conversations, but I only have a couple minutes. Today is Bill Nix, and he is going to be presenting the Dr. Naismith, who was the inventor of basketball, and so he's going to come in just a minute. A couple of announcements. Remember that our next book for lunch will be in September, the first Wednesday in September, and have a scheduled person already. And then, of course, that's our what we call our kickoff. And in October and through the rest of the year, during the summer, we take a break. We do have adult and teen and children summer reading things, so you can read books. There's be part of our tic-tac-toe game and things like that, and win prizes, or you can just turn things in and have a good time. So see Alicia for that at the front desk. She's not at the front desk anymore. She's in the technical services office and things like that. But she'll help you. Any of our staff can help you on it, but she's the one that's making the game. And then Judy does the bingo game or the tic-tac-toe or whatever we call that now. Challenge game for the children. And it is quite a good challenge. So if you have grandkids be here for the summer and you need something to work with them on, you can bring them here and take out a challenge game. And there are crafts and things and they can do downstairs during the week if you don't want to go buy all that stuff. They don't have to. You can bring them down and they can work here in the basement. So the reading will begin, kickoff will be May 26th. Is that right? It's a Thursday. I think it's May 26th, Thursday. So just so you know that. And then this afternoon at 1:30 after the day afterwards, if you can, we're doing what we call community conversations. And we're talking about ways that we're looking at improving the library, and we would like your input. So if you don't have anywhere to go, please stay, give us your thoughts, your input, help us. And and you'll be our first people to help us do that. We thought, you know what, you guys know who we are, you know the library, but we want to hear your opinions. So at 1:30 after our presentation, stay and you go to the bathroom, get up and go to the bathroom, come back, and bathroom back here, come back and hear from the library staff at the Pioneer Memorial Library. All righty. Dr. Naismith, would you come, please?
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, this is the troublemaker table.
So my staff said I should put dark blue on today, and they said, well, but then I need some purple, and I said, no, we're going to keep it the same. So Dr. Naismith, how in the world did you come up with basketball?
Stick around. Yeah. Well, can you help me? There we go. How's that? Oh, beautiful. Oh, thank you. Oh, it's wonderful that you invited me this week, National Library Week, because the last few weeks, I've just been tied up watching all that wonderful basketball on TV. As Melanie said, my name's Dr. James Naismith, and I invented the game of basketball, which has brought so much joy to the world, playing it, watching it, and all I can say is you're welcome. But you know, that wonderful tournament that I was watching, that NCAA tournament, it reminds me, I live in Lawrence and I drove out. My wife didn't come with me. She'd seen me drive. And so, I had gone east the 2 weeks before to watch the NAIA basketball tournament. The NAIA basketball tournament was the very first national basketball tournament, and it's for smaller colleges, but it was the very first national basketball tournament played in Kansas City, and it's still played in Kansas City. It went to Oklahoma for about 10 years, but came back, and that's just a wonderful. I tell you that because it predates the NCAA March Madness tournament by 2 years. Yeah. So it was the very first, and my good friend Frank Kramer, who started Kramer Chemical, in Gardner, Kansas, at Kramer Chemical is a sports athletic, medicinal, and phys ed kind of company. And, Emil Liston, who was the athletic director at Baker University. The three of us started that NAIA basketball tournament on my kitchen table there in Lawrence. So I'm very proud of that. Now that started in 1937. 1937. Now, the year before, 1936, I had been to the Berlin Olympics. I went to the Berlin Olympics because that's the first year that my game, basketball, was played in the Olympics, played by the whole world. And my good friend, Fog Allen, there's Fog. Fog's the handsome one over there on the left. Fog Allen is the one who collected the money to send Maud and me. But Maud got sick and she couldn't go, so I had to go alone. But I got to throw up the opening tip-off of that tournament. I got to put the gold medal. The American team, United States, won that tournament. United States won every game in the Olympics until 1972 when the Russians cheated. And I got to put the medal over the winning team, the United States team. And a little footnote to that team, I think is a footnote. Everything I'm going to tell you today, I think is a footnote and interesting. But six members of that very first Olympic team were from McPherson, Kansas. Yes, McPherson, Kansas. They had a wonderful AAU team, the McPherson Oilers. And they were employees of McPherson Refinery, and they traveled around the Midwest and played, and that was advertising. Big AAU programs in the 20s and 30s. But I started to tell you, my friend Paul collected the money to send me, and the way he collected it was through pennies for Naismith. Every college game and every high school game ticket that was sold that year, a few pennies went into the pot to send me to the Olympics. So thank you, Paul. Paul was a player of mine at KU. He was a student of mine at KU. He's been very kind to me over the years. Now, I'm confident that when I finally do pass away, the lead sentence in my obituary will be Dr. James Naismith, inventor of basketball. I'm confident that will be the lead sentence. I've done a few other things with my life so far, besides invent the game of basketball. I'm an ordained minister. I'm a medical doctor. Maud and I have 5 children, 13 grandchildren. I did all that schooling after I dropped out of high school. And yeah, at age 15, and didn't go back to school till I was 22. When I dropped out of high school, I fell in with, good job, I was a lumberjack, good career, but it just rough, and always around men who needed civilizing, and I became borderline alcoholic, not leading a good life. And it occurred to me that my mother would not be proud of me. And the good thing about being Christian is you just turn the page. And that's what I did. I turned the page, went back to school, got all that education. I don't want to use this as an excuse, but I'm an orphan. My mom and dad died when I was 9. My last memory that I had was my mother. My father had typhoid, and she stayed to take care of my father. She caught it. She died. The last memory I have of my mother is I'm sitting in the back of Uncle Peter's wagon. Uncle Peter raised me. he and, my sister Annie, my older sister, I'm sitting in the back of the wagon, waving at Mom, and she's waving at me. That's the last memory I have of her. So, but that's not an excuse. I went back to school. I am credited with inventing the forerunner of the football helmet. I played all the sports, and football in the early days, oh my, it was rough. In fact, Teddy Roosevelt almost banned it. He didn't have the power to ban it, but Teddy had to fully pull it. People were dying in the sport and hurt and just terrible. Well, in those days, if you were and I was the center, I would hike the ball as a quarterback. In those days, the defense could stand over the center and would hike the ball, grab the center's ears, and pull him down. Yeah, that's real funny. So Maud was my landlord's daughter when I was in Springfield, Massachusetts. And Maud and I got a rugby ball, cut it in half, sliced it, and pulled it down over my ears to protect my ears. And so that's why they credit me with inventing the forerunner of the football. And you know, I told you I was a big minister and medical doctor, and my sister Annie, who helped raise me, was Uncle Peter. She never forgave me for not going into the ministry full time and rather than sports and YMCA and athletics. She never, because in those days, sports were thought of as part of the devil's workshop, just wasting your life, okay, to play sport. She never forgave me, but it dawned on me that I could touch more people in a positive way through athletics and recreation and sports and phys ed. Because I played football one day and my teammate, something must have happened over here because he just started cussing a blue streak against the other team. And when he turned around, he said, "Oh, James, I didn't know you were there. Pardon me." Pardon where it comes from. But pardon, and it occurred to me that I could affect more people by living my sermon rather than preaching it on Sunday. That's why I went towards the YMCA. I spent 18 months with the YMCA in Europe after World War I. You know, before the soldiers were discharged, got a lot of spare time, a lot of free time on your hands in the service, and a lot of temptation over in France. Oh, temptation everywhere, but especially in France. And so I went over there and organized sports and gave essays and lectures on how to live a good life. So I spent 18 months over there after World War I. And you know, that Maud, we had 5 children, and Maud, she did all the heavy lifting with raising our kids. You know, I was gone a lot with sports, the YMCA. I've been at Kansas National Guard, went down to the Texas-Mexico border when Pancho Villa was acting up. So Maud did the heavy. In fact, Maud took in her sister's baby. Her sister died in childbirth. Maud took that baby in, raised that baby for 3 years until our brother-in-law could get back on his feet and get into some kind of routine. And you know, Maud, she's a little bit of a woman, and she caught typhoid in the late 90s, 1890s, lost her hearing, hair turned white, but oh, she's a good one. She's a good one. Glad I got her. Oh dear, what else? Those are some of the other things that I did besides invent the game of basketball that we all enjoy. I'd like to tell you how I came to invent basketball. I was a PE teacher at the YMCA training school, YMCA training college in Springfield, Massachusetts. And I was a professor, a young professor, but I was also taking a class under Dr. Gulick called the Psychology of Sports. And Dr. Gulick wanted the 3 of us young professors who were taking his class to come up with a game that could be played indoors out of those harsh Massachusetts winters. between football and baseball season. And it had to be played indoors, it had to be played by many, and it had to be easily learned. And so we had a phys ed class that we could try out games with. And we tried to modify lacrosse, modify rugby, modify football, baseball, softball, but they were too rough. You were hurting the facility, breaking windows, people were getting hurt, it was too rough indoors. And the poor students in that PE class, they got tired of us trying to come up with something like that. And in the meantime, they're doing a lot of drilling and calisthenics and, oh heavens, gymnastics, just things that are boring. They got the bad reputation around school being called the incorrigibles. Well, I think they were just bored with us trying to come up with this game. And so the day before I was to report back to Dr. Gulick in the class, I sat down to think about sports in a philosophical way, and it occurred to me that we would have to use a big ball in whatever game we came up with. Because if it was a small ball, golf ball, tennis ball, baseball, softball, hockey puck, you would have to use a piece of apparatus to manipulate it. And that's not easily learned. So we're going to use a big ball. Okay, well, what's the most popular sport at the time? Rugby. Well, rugby's too rough to play in. Well, why is it rough? Because people are being tackled. Well, why are they being tackled? Because they're running with the ball. There will be no running with my large ball. Okay, well, if you can't run with it, what can you do with it? Well, you can throw it, pass it to your teammates anywhere in the gymnasium. Great. I just invented keep away. There has to be some. There has to be some. It also occurred to me that vertical goals encourage roughness. Soccer nets, hockey nets, goal posts, goal lines. Encourage roughness because the offense is trying to push their way in across the goal line or into the net, and the defense is trying to keep them out. So that friction there causes roughness. Okay, so our goal will be horizontal, where you have to use finesse and skill to throw this large ball without running into it. I pictured a box about 18 inches square, but you can't just put it out there in the middle of the gymnasium. The defense would gather around and knock the ball, but it had to be elevated. We've got something, I could hardly wait. Where are those rules? I could hardly wait to write down the 13 rules, take them in the next morning to Miss Lyons, our stenographer, so she could type them up. And that's what I did. I'm going to pass these around. There's 47 of you here. So don't go spending your life there. Okay, pass it around. All right, there you go. There you go. 13 rules. Miss Lyons typed them up, and in the meantime, I asked Pop Stebbins, our custodian, if he had 2 boxes about 18 inches square. He went downstairs, couldn't find any boxes, but he found peach baskets. You knew that. So the peach baskets, I tacked one. You know what? There's a running track. There's a running track around all the gymnasiums. The YMCA's people would walk, they would run, they would lean over the rail, watch the PE class before. And that running track, you know how high that running track is? 10 feet. Yeah, that's how scientific it is. Okay, so I tacked a peach basket up one end of the gym, peach basket at that end of the gym. Miss Lyons gave me the rules. I thumbtacked them to the tack board behind the door. The incorrigibles came in. 18 members in that class. The leader of the incorrigibles, the unofficial spokesman, was Frank Mahan. Oh, what you got there, Nate Smith? Oh, another one of your games. This ought to be good. So I divided the class, 9 on each side. And we played the very first game of basketball, December 21st, 1891, Springfield, Massachusetts, at 10:30 in the morning. And they loved it. They loved it. The score was 1-0. You know, they had trouble catching it and not running. And they would try to shoot from what we would call half court, you know, like that. And then the defense would come behind them and knock the ball away. But they loved it. And that was December 21st. And so almost immediately, they all went home for Christmas and took the game with them. And they played that game in their hometowns. So it spread very fast. And then 30 days later, the Triangle newspaper, which is the YMCA newspaper, they printed the 13 rules, and the game went all over the world in 30 days. And so it spread so fast. I'm very proud to say that those foundational rules, many of them are still in effect. First of all, the pages, it only took 2 pages for Ms. Lyons to type it up. And they're at Allen Fieldhouse there in Lawrence. The rules, the original rules are there. Just press the button, the light will come on, and you'll see them. And 2 pages. The rule book today is 80 pages long. Oh, such a better game. And my rule, thou shalt not foul, took 18 words. You know, don't grab, don't push, don't trip, don't do none of that. Now, thou shalt not foul takes 8 pages. And what is a foul and what the penalty is. So the game has really changed, I think, for the better. But you know, those foundational rules, it's a game of skill and finesse. You still cannot hit it with your fist. That's right, that you can't kick it. In fact, if any part of your leg on purpose tries to stop the ball, that's considered a kick, not just your foot. And that's in the rules, the original rules. I anticipated goaltending. You can't touch the ball while it's up around the basket. You still can't run with the ball. I wish I'd have thought of dribbling. Dribbling is the most astonishing improvement to the game of basketball of all time. It did not take the players very long to realize that if they threw the ball to themselves, or bounced it to themselves, they were running with it. And so if you read the sports pages in the middle of the 1890s, and the sports writer describes the team as playing the Yale style of play, that means that team is very proficient in dribbling. I wish I had thought of dribbling. Just wonderful. You know, we didn't cut the bottom out of the basket. We didn't cut the bottom out of the net until 1912. You know, we didn't just have peak baskets, but we had boxes and we had chain nets with you pull a string and it pops it out, or you take a broom handle and you knock the ball back out. But we had nets like you see today, but we didn't cut the bottom out until 1912. But there was no hurry. There was no hurry because the rule was written that after a basket, take the ball out and you start the game over at the center jump. We played basketball that way until 1937. We played the Olympics. We played the Olympics that way in 1936. And it's such a much better game now, where you get the ball out of the basket, you throw it from another man. So much better, just slow. I think the rules committee, I sat on the rules committee, and I think the rules committee, out of deference to me, kept that rule in effect, because I thought it was exciting, like a kickoff in football. Well, it's not. I should have been less hard-headed about that rule and kind of thought it good. So So those are some of the, and backboards became mandatory in 1925. We had backboards long before that, but mandatory in 25. The reason backboards came into existence is because you know all those running tracks and the baskets up there? Well, sometimes fans, when you shoot the ball, sometimes fans would knock the ball, they'd lean over the rail and knock the ball away. I submit to you that that is a home court advantage. And so we had, for years, we had plywood, and that evolved into the backboards. Just great. You know, that first Olympic tournament that I was telling you about, 21 teams competed in it. 21 teams competed in it. Should have been 22, but Spain was having their civil war, so they didn't send a team. And France played Estonia. In the very first game. And the championship game was between the United States and Canada. And I was born in Canada, but I became a United States citizen in 1925. So it was a joy for me to see both of those teams playing and the United States win. But the score, the reason I thought of this is because y'all chuckled that the score was 1-0 in the first game. Well, that Olympic game was 19-8. The United States over Canada. But once again, it was a slower game because you had to take the ball out of the basket before you started it. Okay. So I'm just proud and lucky that came up with the game, and as I said earlier, just brought so much joy. Now, many of you know that I came to, especially this gentleman here, knows that I coached and taught at KU. I say, especially this gentleman, because he's wearing his K-State gear today, okay? And I know he wouldn't have worn that except Dexter's here today, okay? He's a good sport. Now, I came to Lawrence, Kansas University, 7 years after I had been at the game of basketball, 1898. And I came to Lawrence for 3 jobs. I was to be the athletic director, I was to run the PE department, and I was to be the college chaplain. Yes, KU did not have a basketball team. I started the basketball team 1898-99, that winter. And our very first game was against the YMCA of Kansas City, Missouri, and we lost. And our next game was against the Topeka YMCA. We won that game. Our very first college game was against William Jewell College in Liberty, Missouri. Our very first home game was played in a skating rink. And there's a plaque there in Lawrence at Aiken, Kentucky, where we played our very first game, home game, February 10th, 1899. And you go up and see it, Aiken, Kentucky. And I was the very first coach of KU basketball. And there's only been 8 of us that have coached KU, and I'm the answer to a trivia question. Who is the only coach in KU history to have a losing record? Yeah. You'd think the guy who invented it would know how to, but you know, I didn't think he coached it. I thought, coming from a phys ed, a recreation, a health background, I thought you just played it. And that hour and a half later, it's its own reward. It's its own reward. You don't need trophies, medals, ribbons. You come out a different person. You are recreated. I don't care if it's the theater or basketball or picnicking in the park. You are different. And so I thought that was its own reward coming from that background. You know, when Fogg who made KU basketball. When Bob told me that he was gonna go be the paid coach at Baker University, I said, oh, Bob, you don't coach basketball, you just play it. Well, he showed us all, that he's the father of basketball coaching. He showed us all how to coach and how teamwork and conditioning and cutting and screening and shooting. He truly is the father of basketball coaching. But in those early days, there were times when I would not even travel with the team. It's its own reward. There were times I would be the referee. The first time Frog and I played against each other in a game as coaches, we were the two referees. And so, you know, I know you're tempted to have a home court advantage for that, but you know, that was the world I came from. I even wrote an essay in 1911. Wrote an essay in 1911 warning colleges and universities do not come under the sway of commercialism. You will forget why you turn the lights on every morning. You will lose track of your mission. And so that was 1911 when I wrote that essay. But I'll tell you what, the game is so much fun and we love watching that tournament. But I did not envision LeBron James and Sue Bird and trifectas and Dick Vitale. I did not envision that at all. But I'm so happy that I did invent the game so all of you can enjoy it. What I'd like to leave you with today is that we all have kids and grandkids and neighbors and nieces and nephews that play youth sports. And youth sports gives our children, our little ones, so much. Lifelong friends, time management. You mean I have to do my homework and practice? Respect for the facility, respect for the equipment, respect for the opponent. When that opponent takes you to double overtime or extra innings, that opponent has brought the very best out in you. So you should respect that opponent that makes you hustle and dive for that ball all under an umbrella of sportsmanship. So I just remind all of us adults that to give so much to our children, don't do anything that would cause them to quit. We should want them to play forever because it gives them so much. And if you think we're all going to play for Bill Self, there's very few of us that will play for Bill Self or with LeBron James or with Sue Bird. But none of us will make that level if we don't fall in love with the sport first. And if we adults are chirping and embarrassing our children, they will not fall in love with it. So that's what we got to do is get out of the way, just release our children to love the sport. And it gives them so much. We should want them to play their whole lives. I want to thank you for inviting me here today to hear a little bit about my life, a little bit about how I came to invent the game of basketball. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them now. You need to remember, though, I was born in 1861, and I may have forgotten a few things along the way. So no hard questions that I maybe forgot. Okay? Yes.
Who are the two schools that were voting besides KU on the base?
Oh, I don't know, but I know one was somewhere overseas. I know that the Booth family bought the rules for KU, $4.3 million. And that's where the rules belong, with Naismith. And you know, we almost didn't have those rules. Remember, I told you Frank Mahan, the leader of the Incorrigibles, after the game, he went to the tag board, took the rules off the tag board, folded them up, took them home for Christmas. He brought them back, saying, Naismith, you should have these. I took these after our game, took them home, but you should have these. And then who's got the rule? Yeah, Look at the top. We wrote at the top, basketball in handwriting, 2 words. Basketball, not one word like it is now. And Mahan and I came up with, he wants to call it baseball. Not that one, basketball. And I'm glad he brought it back. You could, that's a photocopy of the rule, of course. The original there in Allen Fieldhouse. Thank you. Yes. Yes. The ball, now, those rules, the first phrase of the rules, the ball shall be an association football. That's a soccer ball. An association football. That's a soccer ball. Remember, I said it's going to be a big ball. Only 2 big balls. Soccer ball and a rugby ball. And a rugby ball is a big old fat football. And it's built like that so that you could tuck it in your arm so you could run with it. And since there's not going to be any running at basketball, there's not going to be any running with the game, then we wouldn't use the rugby ball. So association football, soccer ball. Okay? It didn't take long for the sporting good manufacturers to come up with basketball equipment. Basketball shoes, basketballs, goals, yeah, the sports industry, sporting goods industry caught on really quick that this was a game that was going to stay.
How long were you at KU?
Came in 98, and I haven't been around much since 39. Yeah, so, yeah, 98 to 39, somebody do some cipher. 30 to 41, yeah, and, professor, basketball coach, yeah, PE, thank you. Yes,
Did you come up with the, all the different, positions in the game, or did that go along
no,
the
that
years?
evolved with the game, but in the early days, depending on how big the gymnasium was, determined how many players were on the court. If it was less than 1,800 square feet, then you had 5 players on the court from each team. If it was more than 1,800 square feet, it was 7 players on each team. If it was more than 3,600 square feet, it was 9 players on the team. And we codified it down to 5 within 10 years. Also, one of my foundational rules, I wrote backwards. I wrote it and it encouraged roughness. The rule for when the ball goes out of bounds, which team would get it, I wrote it that, well, whoever could get to the ball first, that team would get the ball. Well, I guarantee you, if you're running for it, I'm gonna trip you. You know, and I'm gonna grab you, I'm gonna hold you. So that encouraged roughness. And so we wrote that, flipped that rule also. Yeah. Oh, so much fun.
What year was the breakaway basketball goal?
Oh,
And I know Dorrance made it,
well,
and Dorrance.
as soon as Charles Barkley broke it, yeah. And Shaq brought it down on himself. Yeah, so they played in the 90s. So that's, yeah, for years, it didn't break away. It didn't, you know, it didn't have that hinge. You just broke glass and standards came down. Yeah, so they put, yeah, Shaq was in high school in 88. And so it's the 90s, yeah. Yeah.
What building on campus were you playing at the end of your career?
It was Robinson. We played at the Snow Hall also. Snow Hall had pillars. It had pillars, but it also had a very short ceiling. So you had to really, you couldn't put much arch on the shots. but I found that there was a, crawl space in Snow Hall, so we lowered the floor, which made things a little bit fun. But yeah, and, you know, Allen Fieldhouse didn't come till the mid-50s with, Fogg, and it's a shame, Fogg recruited Will Chamberlain, who was an athlete very far ahead of his time. And he never got to coaching because there was mandatory retirement age in Kansas of 70. And the state legislature would not set that mandatory retirement age aside for Fogg. So they must have read my essay. Dribbling it almost immediately because everybody was picking it up, Yale style of play, by 96. And the first game was 91. You know, basketball players are smart. It didn't take long to figure out I'm not running with the ball.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Maybe slam dunk, sorry.
Slam dunk, well, that's another, thank you, man, you guys are good. It's like I fed you these questions, you know? Yeah. Oh. When did the slam dunk come in? Well, people dunked it, but it wasn't known as dunking until those 6 players from McPherson went to New York for the tryouts of who would be on the Olympic team. And they had 2 very tall players, and they were what we call dunking. And a New York sports writer described as they put the ball in the basket that it was like dunking their donut in coffee. And you go to the McPherson Museum. Go to the McPherson Museum, and that whole wall in the McPherson Museum is that newspaper article describing dunking. That we all know what dunking is today. You know, because of the McPherson. The other 6 other players were from the Universal Studios AAU team. So the McPherson Oilers and the Universal Studios players, and then 1 college basketball player from Oregon or Washington, somewhere up in the Northwest, was on the team. But McPherson, Kansas, 6 players, and they celebrate that. They celebrate that as well. They should. And that permeates the whole town. Their high school teams, boys and girls, both are they very good competitive teams. Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for inviting me. You've been a good bunch. You've acted interesting. You've chuckled when you were supposed to chuckle. And it's just been a good day. Thank you very much for inviting me. Oh, looky there. All right, thank you. Good bunch. Thank you.